there's points where I'm just like, how could God still want me? How could God still want to call me his? Like, what about me is so great? And the cool thing is, I exist and God just loves me. It sounds so crazy, and even now, like, it brings kind of like happy emotions and almost like happy tears to my eyes. But to think that even through all of this stuff that I have been through, that I've put myself through, I've put my family through, I've put some of my friends through, that God still wants me and he's still gonna give me the best things in life is the best thing in the world. Hello, my name is Jordan, and today we are going to be talking about probably the most vulnerable thing I'm ever going to talk about on this channel, and it's my relationship with God. Right behind me, I know I have a lot of clothes, but but this has been on my heart for like the past, I think, past month. It has just been pulling at my heart to make a video at this, and it literally is to the point where I feel a little bit crazy. Like, I just have to do it, because if not, it's just gonna be eating at me. And I think it's because at this particular point, the best way for me to share love and light and hope is to talk about God. That's what it feels like to me. I feel like every turn I make, it's just right there in front of me. I'm like, I'm not a millionaire, so I can't do much. And it's like my voice can still do so much, and I need to give. So this is my contribution to the world. Not Gal Gadot, but here we go. So I'm going to be talking about why I rededicated my life, as a lot of people probably are confused with. They're like, you rededicated your life? I thought you've always been a Christian. And I've definitely always professed to be a Christian. I've always said, yeah, I'm a Christian, but I would say it wasn't up until like year 22, 23 for me that I started to really understand the importance of my faith and understand what it means to be a Christian. It's not just about listening to Joel Osteen's podcast. It's not just about reading Pastor Michael Todd's books. It's not just about Christian music. It's really about the relationship you have with God. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about being a Christian is you can just go directly to the Creator and say, hey, what's good? How's your day been? Thank you for giving me life today. Like, it sounds kind of crazy like that. But I think that's the most awesome part. Like, there's no way to necessarily be a right Christian. And I think that is one of the most liberating things about my experience that I finally understood. And it's so weird because, like, hearing some of the stuff that I hear, I just want to remind people, as long as two or more gather in my name, that's what God said, he's there. So he never said you have to be in a physical location. He never said it has to be a Zoom call. He didn't specify it couldn't even be a group chat. God just wants to be with you where you are. And I think that was the hardest thing for me to understand, because when I look back at my life, there's points where I'm just like, how could God still want me? How could God still want to call me his? Like, what about me is so great? And the cool thing is, I exist and God just loves me. It sounds so crazy, and even now, like, it brings kind of like happy emotions and almost like happy tears to my eyes. But to think that even through all of this stuff that I have been through, that I've put myself through, I've put my family through, I've put some of my friends through, that God still wants me and he's still gonna give me the best things in life is the best thing in the world. And I get so emotionally happy because I didn't earn this stuff. I think one of my biggest blessings, and I tell him all the time, but one of my biggest blessings is my husband. When we first started dating, I didn't feel like I deserved him, because it felt like oh my God, I don't want to say this story, but it's the closest thing. I can't remember their names, and I'm a horrible Christian for it, but it felt like that dude who like literally married that whore, and everyone was like, why would you marry her? And he's like, that's what God told me to do. And then God reminded me it wasn't that deep and I need to calm down. I'm still a good person. But like, that's how it felt. And like, God will always give you the best, even though you don't deserve it. So let me just get into the whole, like, let me get into it. So when I was younger, like 22, 23, I was restarting my relationship with God. And I was waiting for a very like firework moment. I kind of refer to it lovingly as a firework faith, type of thing where God basically opens up his arms to me. He's like, I've seen you working hard on your faith. I've seen you doing this. I've seen you doing that. Come on to me. Like, I love you and I'm here for you and like, bring it on in. And I wanted something super crazy to happen. I wanted like neon lights, tap dancing frogs, you know, just something insane where I'm like, okay, clearly this is a God moment and he's telling me to come to him and like, he wants me here. And that never happened exactly. No tap dancing frogs, very disappointing. No. But I had my moment of realizing that God wanted me, and probably one of the weirdest moments of my life. I had just gotten done with the long day at work, and I just really was over it. I was over the boss that I had. I was really confused with my supervisor, like our supervisor, because I felt like she wasn't paying attention to how bad my boss was. I like her general like communication with me, not at her job. My boss was really good at her job, but I digress. And I was really frustrated with how overbearing my parents were. Remember that will come in handy in a second. I was really frustrated with my friends, but a lot of that frustration came from a place of me comparing myself to my friends, comparing myself to my enemies. After this, I ended up purging quite a few people off of my Facebook because I just watched them to see how great their life was compared to mine. I would just sit there and wallow in self-pity. And I was just going through it in the weirdest way possible, and I was not taking myself out of this really bad place. And I think a lot of it was because I just didn't feel like I was worthy of being taken out of this really bad place. And I would say that was a lot of my depression and anxiety talking. I'm pretty open about the fact that I've dealt with the depression most of my like kind of adult years, but yeah. So on this particular day, I'd just gotten done with work. I was not feeling well. I wanted to stay home. I was thinking about my abusive ex-boyfriend. I really want to make it known that like this guy, we don't have any pictures together. So don't worry, you don't know who he is. There's a reason why we don't have pictures together. But I was really wrapped up with the fact that he, months prior to this, on my birthday actually, he and I had talked. Again, I was comparing myself to other people, and I was looking at everybody around me at the time get engaged. I was feeling very inadequate and inferior because I wasn't, and everyone was in relationships or serious ones at the time too. And I was just like, you know what? Like, I want to be married. I want this. I want that. Like, why can't I just have it? And so I figured reaching out to, again, an abusive ex, I really just want to drive that home, that I was at that point that desperate for it, for this idea. By the way, marriage is not what it looks like on the gram. But I was so desperate for it that I reached out to him, and he was like really nice and polite during this moment. But what really hit me is that he had apologized for like some of the stuff that he did and his parents because they were racist. And he and I kept talking, and he mentioned something else, and I was like, oh, you know what, like we should probably meet up and get coffee together. And he said, you know, that sounds great, but I would have to check with my girlfriend. I'm sure she would be okay with it, but let me check with her. And as soon as I read that message, my hand started to shake and I dropped my phone, because there's no way in hell, there's no way in hell that he would have done that for me. And I started to wonder why he had so much respect for her, but he had no respect for me, and why he felt so okay protecting her feelings, even in this moment, when he didn't for me. By the way, he cheated on me on my birthday with a friend of mine in a different city. He lied to me about being in that city too. So that's part of the thing with it. And I know a lot of people are like, well, why did you even go back to him? Because on paper, he was perfect. He was an engineer right out of college, making money, like 6 figures. He and I had looked at engagement rings together. Like, I felt like at that point in my life, I just wasn't gonna get anyone better than him. Part of it's because he told me I wasn't, but I felt like an old maid. I felt like I was never gonna get anything better. Joke's on me. But after that, I was just really in a weird space, and just like a really dark space for a couple of months. And my parents had noticed it, my friends had noticed it. I was comparing myself like I had mentioned. And I was really foggy, and I wanted to get out of this fog. And because the day had been so bad, I just told my mom I wasn't gonna go to church. I was like, I'm not feeling it. I don't really want to. And she was like, oh, that's fine. Like, I'll see you afterwards. And she went, and after a couple of like minutes of just feeling very antsy and feeling like all of a sudden I couldn't be in the house, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go get some junk food. And then I decided, nah, I'll just go to church. So I went and I sat down, and it was a guest speaker, and she was just preaching. It was like a really beautiful sermon. I don't know, but it was a really beautiful sermon, and it just made me think about my past. It made me think about everything that had been going on in my life. It made me just really feel differently for the first time in a really long time. I felt like, I understood what God meant when he's like, I take you as you are. And not to get into everything, because we would be here for 3 years, but, I had gone through an abusive ex, toxic friendships, where people were toxic to me, I was toxic to them. I recognize that now. I had gone through so much drama with college, my parents' divorce, a guy who I thought was going to be a good friend, possibly a boyfriend, who turned out to be the person who hurt me. That's what I'm going to leave it at right now. And just dealing with the frustrations of not feeling like I was a good enough Christian, like feeling like I don't pray enough, feeling like my faith wasn't as strong as it should be to be really considered a Christian, feeling like I was worthy of the title, feeling even more conflicted and confused if I would ever get married, because at this point I again felt like an old maid, but then at the same time I was like, is this my punishment for having sex before marriage, that I was not going to be able to find someone that loves me now? Everyone would just classify me as a whore, a dirty whore, and just kind of be afraid to ever date me again. On top of that, like, at the time I was just generally celibate, and so trying to date people was really hard, and I didn't really understand why I had felt so conflicted to say, like, no, because, like, I'm gonna say it. I saw some really attractive guys, and I was like, you know what? Let's skip the whole first name basis. Let's just get to know each other on a more personal level. But I was like, no, I'm just gonna be celibate. I'm gonna stay in my lane. And the rejection from that was also very, very, like, painful and confusing, because I'm like, wouldn't you want a girl who's not just going... Anyways. So I was just feeling a lot better about everything, and I was praying, and I was in this sermon just really enjoying it, and I felt calmness, a different type of calmness. It's like a really peaceful, tranquil calmness. And because I have like ADHD, I've mentioned this in a really, really long time ago video, but because I'm just as a jumble of energy, basically, sometimes it's hard for me to feel peace and stay in the moment with it. And trust me, quarantine life has been really stressful with that. But I was feeling a lot of peace and calmness, and it's like a type of peace and calmness you can only get from God. And I was enjoying it, and I realized that my head was very clear, and I was feeling really good, and it wasn't like something outside of me, but something within me was helping me flourish and feel this way. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I need God like this in my life more. Even though I didn't get the big fireworks and I didn't get the craziness, I was like, let me accept God into my life and let me really feel that joy. No matter what he does, he's here for me and he wants me, and I'm very blessed to have him. So when it came time to say, like, does anyone dedicate their lives? A couple people went up. They asked, does anyone rededicate their lives? I stood up. We all walked up. The guest pastor, who was a lady, by the way, she prayed over us, and, she said some really beautiful words, and I felt, again, that calmness, but it was even more powerful. It just kind of, like, reverberated through my body, and I just remember feeling just a little bit different, like feeling like I was changed, but not like I was changed. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I felt. So I went to go sit back down, and if you're from a Southern Baptist church, you can do one or two things. You could either finish the sermon there, or you can keep going. She kept going. So after she prayed, she also prophesied it over people, and I was one of the last ones. I wasn't even sure if she was going to do it for me because she had skipped a few people, but she looked at me and she goes, you're a pretty girl. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you. I'm like, thank you. She looks over at my mom, then looks back at me, and she's like, you're a really, really beautiful girl. And I was like, oh my God, like, thank you. The moisturizer is working. So she says that, and I remember this. She looks at me very peculiarly, takes a pause, and then says, "But you gotta stop thinking the answer is to kill yourself in the middle of the night." I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry. What? Now, like I mentioned, I had dealt with a lot of anxiety and depression, and I was dealing with thinking I was good enough and dealing with, wondering, am I ever going to equate to anything? And at the time, I think my parents had also, like I mentioned, noticed this. This is why they were smothering and kind of hovering. And to give like a little bit of some insight, my dad, who my parents were divorced at this point, but like my dad came over to my mom's and he was banging on the doors and the windows of my room, or the front door of the house and the window to my room, because I had overslept by like 2 hours, which I never do. Usually if I'm late, I'll text you. But usually if I'm late, I'll text you, and I just hadn't done anything. And my dad had gotten very afraid that something had happened to me. And he came to the door, and I remember he was calling me and he was banging on the front door, and I didn't know what was going on. I woke up and I was terrified. I was like, who's outside? Is someone trying to break in? Is someone trying to hurt me? Is this... But no, my dad was just freaking out because he couldn't get a hold of me. And when he did, he was like, what were you doing? He's like shaking me. He's like, what were you doing? Why did it take you so long to wake up? And I was like, I was just sleeping. And he's like, why? And I was like, because I'm tired. And he ends up like hugging me and telling me that he was just really worried about me. And he wanted to make sure I was okay, because he couldn't reach me. So yeah, that's kind of like, I think my parents were afraid to ask me what was really going on, because they didn't want, or not that they didn't want, but they didn't know how to handle the situation. So by the guest pastor saying this, and this is something that we were just dealing with kind of quietly in our home, and I was dealing with more so inside of me, she basically explained that, God is here and he wants to like have me, and he's going to give me everything that I really want in my life. I just have to let him in, and I have to give over everything to him. And then she doubled down on the whole relationship business. And I was good at praying over my jobs. I'm like, God, lead me in the right direction with my job. Lead me in the right direction with how to spend my money. Lead me in the right direction who I should call as friend. But when it came to guys, I guess I didn't have faith in him in that capacity. There's a lot of irony in that statement. But she's like, you have to turn that over too. And you have to understand that like God only wants to give you the best, and you're not as bad as you think you are. You're not like the worst Christian, and you're not this and you're not that. And she just really went in, and I just remember being both so confused and so thankful, because again, this lady wasn't supposed to be the main speaker. Like, she was a guest speaker at the last minute, and everything she was talking about was stuff that I was dealing with on such an internal level. Like, yeah, my parents knew something was going on, but they didn't know about everything going on. And it was just like such a powerful moment that for me, that was my firework moment, that I was like, okay, God's really speaking through this woman. And I just couldn't at that point not rededicate my life. Like, obviously, I was just like, obviously God knows what's up. And after that, I mean, my faith was small. It was definitely increased in that moment, but my faith was stalled. But I started to really work on my faith and kind of working it out and growing. And that's where I think I am today. Is like, it's stronger, but it's never going to be to the point where I'm like, okay, my faith is good. I'm strong enough. I'm fine enough. And I say all that to say, like, even in your darkest moments, even in your worst places, even when you're not sure where to go, what's up, what's down, what's left, what's right, God can really be there, and he can really show up and show out. Don't test God, because God ain't nobody we tested with, but be open to him and be open to the moments with him. And if you feel like you're really foggy, if you feel like you need clarity, if you feel like you're not good enough, just know that God thinks you are. Not even just good enough, he thinks you're great. He wants to be there for you, and you're more than your mistakes. You're more than what other people assume you to be. And you're more than you can even understand and imagine. And I'm really hot. I feel very vulnerable, but very, very good. and I hope that this video like helps somebody. I would highly suggest to stay home currently during this time, and if you want to watch like a really good church service, I would suggest Bethel, and then like of course Transformation Church. I'm gonna link Transformation Church below. If you guys have any questions, feel free to always ask. My channel isn't just like, you know, a Christian channel, but I might put some more stuff out in the future. I don't know, but this was a very vulnerable and big thing, and I'm glad that I did it, I think. Okay, well, this is where it's gonna end, and I will see you guys in the next video.